let's try the calculator. Ooh, very pretty. This is like Windows XP looking, and I dig it. No, I'm kidding. Today we're going to be doing some head-to-head testing between 4 very state-of-the-art and highly regarded LLMs: ChatGPT O3, Google Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude Opus 4, and DeepSeek R1 0528, which is the newly updated variant of DeepSeek. Now, for this testing, it is going to be extremely simple. I will provide every LLM with the same exact prompt, which is essentially to use JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to make a website that emulates an actual operating system. The user should be able to go on the website and click icons and navigate around as they would in an actual operating system environment. Now, this is going to be very simple, and I may give the LLMs 1 or 2 chances to remedy any potential issues that may pop up. But aside from that, I want to see their ability to kind of one-shot this, if you will. And with that, we're just kind of going to jump into it. Now, I suppose first and foremost, we can just start with ChatGPT O3 as the tab is open right here. And I'm just going to paste the prompt in, go ahead and click. And of course, we will take a look at any thinking traces that do appear for any of the models that actually generate this. Now, normally I like to be rather forgiving in terms of working with LLMs, but being that a lot of these are pretty highly regarded and highly priced, I may go Gordon Ramsay on these LLMs perhaps. So we can see that it's thinking right here. And I should probably zoom in on this page just a slight bit, so I will go ahead and do that real quick. I do apologize. There we go. That's much better. All right. Ooh. Okay, so it thought for 24 seconds. It opens up the result in its little artifact window. It is naming this Web OS, which is interesting, and it is coding at light speed. No, no, I'm kidding. But, you know, it's pretty quick, so that's good. All right, the result has been generated here in one single HTML file, which I don't mind because then I don't have to organize multiple files. All right. Well, we do have a little operating system looking window here, I suppose. There is a system clock. When I click on these, oh, okay, it did open a file browser, a vacation image, an MP3, and a zip. So it kind of went very hard on emulating many different file types, which I suppose is good. There does seem to be somewhat of a kind of Mac OS browser window looking aesthetic here. Aside from that, there is a gradient in the background. I don't see a start menu here. These do seem a bit slow to respond. Oh, okay, we do have about. Can I reposition the windows? I can. Can I resize the windows? Not necessarily. All right, tells me a little bit about it. Drag windows, open apps, and enjoy the pixelated freedom. Thank you. All right, so, and it seems like this is just supposed to be images for these logos, for these icons, but it was replaced with text, assuming it was not able to get the images working. Okay, well, overall, it works, which is obviously a positive. However, I would say that's kind of the extent of a lot of the good things I have to say about it. It is kind of, as the youth would say, mid. So let's just go ahead and now try this with Anthropic's Claude Opus 4. And we will go ahead and press enter here. Also, I suppose this gives us a little insight into the actual kind of like aesthetic of using either one of these AIs in terms of the way the web interface looks. Claude is definitely going a little slower, but it is drafting its artifact here and will undoubtedly open up some side window as well as it begins to code, which is okay. And we'll just kind of let it go and see what comes up. I will say the script that Claude is generating is extremely lengthy, and it's not necessarily the fastest, so it's kind of giving me like LLM on Raspberry Pi 4B token speed vibes, but aside from that, it looks to be pretty intricate, so I do have high hopes for what we're hopefully soon going to see here. It just finished and then immediately started running it in the artifact window, which has kind of screwed up my test, but aside from that, our first look there does appear to be quite good. So I am just going to go ahead and copy this and save it into an HTML file, which we can then test in our larger browser window. All right. This looks, well, it's quite simple, but it's elegant. The file folders do work. You know, I did this when I was testing DeepSeek, where I became enamored with its aesthetic, and then when I went to actually test it, it didn't work, so I probably shouldn't make that mistake again. Settings. All right, well, we don't need settings. File browser, text editor. Maybe the start. Okay, I think it might be another one of those scenarios where it essentially looks fantastic, but functionally is not necessarily functional. Okay, here's what I'm going to do because I like to hedge against the potential of this not playing nice with specific versions of browsers. So I will just go ahead and open this in Google Chrome as well. And unfortunately, we don't actually get any functionality here. So, all right. Well, again, I'm not going to really say much, I guess. We're just going to continue the testing, but that is somewhat of a tease because this is beautiful. You know what I will do? Just to give the benefit of the doubt, I will go ahead and just put this back in this weird little thing here. Okay, and just verify that the functionality also does not exist from within the artifact window live preview. So, okay. All right, so these don't error out, but the start menu does, and it just gives us the console error right there. All right, let's just hop into the next contender, DeepSeek R1 0528. Network error, please try again later. We're now trying this with Google Gemini 2.5 Pro. We'll just let it run, and then we will see. Now, this is quite interesting where it does appear that it's still thinking. No, maybe not. Okay, so it didn't think very long, and it kind of just started spitting out the script immediately. From what I'm seeing here, it is the only one so far that is actually doing this in separate scripts, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, as I suppose for cleanliness and actually being able to understand what exists in these scripts, this is a better way to go about doing this. This is quite fast. This is definitely more on par with the ChatGPT 03 speed. Claude was a bit slow. DeepSeek was having some server errors right now, so hopefully that will get remedied because I would like to film the video with it. But all right, this is done. So that was extremely fast. All right, we have the Gemini browser OS result all set. So we're just going to go ahead and take a peek at it. Okay, well, all right, so what I noticed in the actual generation, it was supposed to just use some stock photo for the background if I did not actually supply it with one, which obviously does not seem to have loaded. So this kind of white on white here is really messing up the test. I suppose I'll check functionality before I decide what to do here. Let's open Notepad. Yep. Oh, okay, so this actually does work if I try to, all right, well, okay, it doesn't let me expand, but it does let me drag. All right, let's now try DeepSeek and see how it does here. I have noticed that there have been some server errors that have been popping up when I've been trying this with DeepSeek. So I really hope this works, as the whole reason I came up with this test actually was just in testing the newly updated DeepSeek R1 model. And the result that it produced was aesthetically, it was Windows 95 aesthetic. It even actually mentioned that it was a Windows 95 aesthetic. It looked awesome, but unfortunately, kind of like the Anthropic Claude result, it looked beautiful, but nothing functionally happened. So I just hope that it actually finishes the generation here without any server errors, and then we'll have a full continuity test. All right, fortunately, the DeepSeek server error did not persist because we do have a fully generated script right here. It did do it all contained within one HTML script, which 3 out of the 4 did, everyone except Google Gemini Pro. It tells us a little bit about this, and we're basically just going to go ahead now and run this. All right, now for our DeepSeek result here. Whoa, whoa. This is quite interesting, and something that I noticed this does, where it almost, you see how it's kind of like contained within a nice little gradient image right here. All right, this is very interesting. Again, I got fooled by this yesterday, so I'm going to check functionality before I start to fanboy out. Browser-based OS, it tells me about it. Get started. Yes, that went away. All right, good, that didn't happen yesterday. All right, let's just, let's try the calculator. Ooh, very pretty. This is like Windows XP looking, and I dig it. No, I'm kidding. Let's do 8 plus 6, which is obviously 14. Nice, good, very good. All right, let's do something harder. Let's do 7 times 9, 63. All right, 8, 4 times 8, 9, 36. Very good, very good. All right, Notepad. This is a Notepad. Oh, let's check. Okay, we can drag. It does full screen. The Notepad thing here is kind of a little concatenated in terms of how much space there was here free, but there is some nice translucence to these windows as well. Maybe there's like kind of like a Vista arrow theme going on here as well, which I was honestly a big fan of. I do have very polarizing takes on Microsoft OSs. All right, web browser doesn't do anything. File Explorer, very good. The icons look really good. And I kind of saw this with the ChatGPT result where it gave us a bunch of different sample file types. All right, so let's just go ahead and take a look at all of our results, starting from the first to the last, in chronological order of when they were generated, not in like judging. So this was the ChatGPT 03 result. Positives, the clock worked. When you actually clicked on these, the associated thing that should have popped up did show up. It wasn't necessarily the best looking thing. You can drag and move around the file windows, you know what I mean, the browser windows, and it did give us just a few sample file types here and things of that sort, and closing the windows does work. In the same vein, the about section right here just kind of gives us a little scroll box, kind of more of a Mac OS, like leopard kind of looking window thing. No start menu that I see. So overall, I'm quite displeased with this result, but functionally it did work very well, at least in the few functions it had. Next up, we had, and something interesting we can see right here is just the actual way they named the tab. So this is, I know probably you'll be like, that's a really stupid thing to focus on, but it is kind of attention to detail. Although nitpicky, it's something I like to kind of see what happens with. So ChatGPT just said Web OS. This right here is the Claude result, which said Web OS desktop environment. Gemini just said Web OS, and then DeepSeek said Web OS browser operating system. So Claude and DeepSeek kind of paid a little more attention to the QOL thing of naming the tab. This being the Claude Opus 4 result, very good looking, probably the most strictly adhering to an actual operating system look within a browser. The icons look good, it's simple, and it's elegantly simple, I suppose one could say. However, unfortunately, functionally, we were somewhat limited in that although the buttons and things do have hover effects, it unfortunately does not have any functionality behind that, or, so, and there was no clock, so it is what it is. Now, the Google one, again, this was, I like that. So it basically just tells me, hey, this doesn't work, but here's why it doesn't work, so you can use these instead. I'm okay with that. Really, the big thing that let this down, because this did have a functional clock as well, is just the lack of a background image here. And it would be unfair of me, I think, to kind of allow this one to fix itself and put in a background image when the other three did not need that. Aside from that, this one worked very well. The file explorer here is arguably well done. It's simple, it's elegant, and again, this kind of, as ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and Google Gemini here gave us a bunch of different sample file types. So this is okay. Again, really the only thing that kind of lets this down is just a lack of a background image, and it did actually try to place one in. I should mention, I did try to have it fix it, but I figured it wasn't fair for the testing since this was one shot. So it just kind of said the unsplash image may just not show up. Sometimes that can happen. So it did attempt to place a background image. It unfortunately was not functional, likely through no fault of the model itself, but unfortunately, I don't know what to say, So again, up to interpretation. And then finally, we have the DeepSeek R1 result, where this one was different than the rest in that it was more of a virtual operating system look to it. Is that a Windows icon in the start button? All right, well, let's just ignore that. But so it didn't full screen this like all the other three models did. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I suppose, truthfully, I would have liked it a bit more if it had actually full screened this, kind of akin to what this looks like here. But aside from that, functionally, it did work properly, at least the notepad, the calculator, and the file explorer. I will say this put more desktop icons than the other results, which, well, okay, Claude had 4 as well, but unfortunately they didn't work. So Claude and DeepSeek put 4 desktop icons here, and Google Gemini 2.5 Pro and ChatGPT 03 only put 2. But they do have a working clock. The DeepSeek one, okay, DeepSeek also has a working clock. Unfortunately, Claude did not. And again, this one really had a nice in-depth look to it in terms of the actual UI and browser navigation and things like that. Okay, that can go off screen, which is bad, but there was translucence to the windows. The icons were somewhat modern and not necessarily like black and white like that. So overall, I will say, they all produced results. which I suppose was the whole purpose of this testing. But really, this was just kind of interesting because this is definitely a more in-depth prompt and test to have here than my kind of typical in local LLM testing where I'm just like, hey, make a retro Python game. Because these models are, some of them, very expensive, state-of-the-art, and supposedly very capable. I will say, and being that I have a main focus on open source here, there is only one model here that I could actually go and download and run on my local machine, assuming I had a machine that could run the model, which I don't, and that is DeepSeek. So essentially this one is open source. The rest are not. So that is also kind of something to consider massively here. But aside from that, all of these models would be able to fix these results and make them what you wanted. Obviously, in a real-world development scenario, you would not be one-shot testing things like this. You would basically start with something like this and then go back to the model and say, okay, here's what I like, here's what I want you to change, and then you would just kind of iteratively develop it into a more aesthetically pleasing and functional result. With that, I suppose that is going to kind of sum up and end this quick little video. I wanted to just test all of these in some form of obscure head-to-head with the same prompt. And yeah, so thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments.